Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Aliyah Day. Glad to be with you this morning. It is a pleasure, a joy to sit behind this desk and to talk to all of you about the portion, which today is the fifth Aliyah of Parashat Chayei Sarah. For those of you who might be watching and you live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, we are in Saginaw, Texas, which is just north of Fort Worth. I went blank there for a second. Fort Worth, Texas, about 15 minutes north of downtown. Very, very close. If you live in the area, you probably know where we're talking about, of course. So anyway, we're here and we invite you to come see us and check us out. We are having an open house this coming Sunday from 3 to 6. And it's amazing how I have been out and about. Rabbi Tovia and I have been out and about last couple of days doing all kinds of things and running into people in the stores just randomly asking us about, if are you Jewish? And I'm interested in learning more about, Jews and Judaism and so forth and so on. And, we're inviting them to the open house. So it seems to me that this is exactly what HaShem has ordered. So, opening up the synagogue to let people come in and learn about Jews and Judaism and just, everything. And, something else that Rabbi and I were talking about last night was that, okay, I'm sorry. I was trying to find a reference while I was talking to you. Anyway, there are some people out there who are Christians and, love God, and maybe they're Bible teachers in their various churches. In fact, one of the gentlemen we ran into at a store, just again randomly, he came up to us, is in fact a Bible teacher at his local church, and that's where they are. That's where they're planted. And they may never become Lapidniks or Jews or what have you, but it's part of our movement, part of our ministry, can be just to educate people about Jews and Judaism so that when they are teaching in their various churches and a topic comes up that has to do with Jews or Judaism, Jewish practice, wouldn't it be nice to know that what they're teaching about that practice is in fact correct, is in fact true? So therefore, having an open house and helping people get educated about different things, is actually can have good consequences. And who knows where that can lead? Maybe somebody in their Bible study that they're having is a Lapidnik or a Holy Spark. You never know. And maybe they learn something new. So, as I've said multiple times, and I say this on purpose because I want you to hear it, I have been doing this for 30 years. Some people have questions. And so, about different things. And I would advise, it's just my opinion, you might want to ask me as opposed to asking somebody who's been in it for like a minute, right? They've got a source. Some people, this has happened, unfortunately. They'll get a source that I recommend them to get. They'll read it and all of a sudden they know more than me. Okay. So I've been doing this for a minute. Okay. And in my tenure, I have run into people, Bible teachers, pastors, whatever, and they're teaching something about Jews and Judaism that is completely wrong. I mean, absolutely wrong, like not true at all. And it's not helpful to them and it's not helpful to their students. And so anyway, all that to say that that's part of our ministry, can be just to help people be educated about Jews and Judaism, which, by the way, can also be an element of dispelling anti-Semitism, So it's multifaceted. If you have a question, guys, would you do me a favor and ask me? Can I just say that out loud? As opposed to asking somebody else who, I've been doing this for like, a year. That's sweet. I read this book. My favorite line, by the way, I love the Bourne Identity movies. Anybody love the Bourne Identity movies? Rebbetzin loves them. I can watch the Bourne Identity movie like nonstop. It's kind of like Rocky almost in a way, but different. Like I can do like a Rocky marathon, or I could do a Born Identity marathon, or I could do both together. And Rebbetzin loves it. She never stops getting tired of the Born Identity series. What, Charlie? Charlie doesn't believe me. But anyway, that's true. It's true. She loves it. But my favorite line of the Born Identity series is where the CIA guy is talking to the novice CIA person and says, "You say that like you read it in a book." That is my favorite line. So anyway, note to self, we have a new Ask the Rabbi chat group, and it's going great. The Ask the Rabbi chat group is so that you can ask a question, and I can answer. Sometimes the Zakins may answer because maybe they know the answer, and that's perfectly fine. But the Ask the Rabbi chat group on WhatsApp is intended for you to ask a question and for me to answer. And I would highly recommend that people utilize that feature, because if you want an answer that's actually accurate, you might want to use that feature, okay? And that has background and sources. Okay, is soapbox over? Is that okay? Can I say that out loud? I hope I didn't hurt anybody's feelings, but if you've been in this for 8 or 9 months and you haven't even gone through conversion yet, you're probably not the guy that needs to be answering the questions. I'm just saying. Is that okay for me to say? All right. Lord of the Rings is better, Sergio says. Well, I don't know. Maybe. I haven't really gotten into Lord of the Rings too much. Not that it's bad. I really like that kind of stuff. I mean, I like the, armor and battle axes. Who doesn't, right? Every man should own a battle axe, in my opinion. I mean that seriously. I actually do own a battle axe, actually. And I think that all men should. I love that kind of stuff. The Lord of the Rings, what drives me crazy about the Lord of the Rings? The little My Precious guy. He gets under my skin. My precious. It gets under my skin. So I have a hard time getting through the series because that guy just drives me bananas. But that's just me. And my doctor says I'm getting better. Good morning, Jubilee. Good to see you. Did I say what we're going to talk about today? Oh, marriage and Minka. We're having insights from Ma'am Loez on the topic of marriage, sweet marriage, and Minka. So, which actually comes from our Torah portion. The service of Minka comes from actually today's Aliyah. So we get a chance to look at that. Marriage is actually an insight from yesterday's Aliyah, I think, or maybe the day before, but we didn't quite get to it. But it's an interesting read. So we're going to get to that today. Talk about marriage and Minka. That's our topic for this morning. Marriage and Minka. Good morning, Jubilee. Glad you're here. Good morning, Seth. Hope you and Sonia are doing great. And all of Sonia's coworkers, listen. Love you guys. Hope you're doing great. You do great work. I know what you do for a living, and it's a good job, and it's an important job. And so you guys are awesome, and thank you for listening and being part of the program. Good morning, Russ. Glad you're here. Good morning, Peaches, formerly from Georgia. Good morning, Amita. Hope you and your fam are doing fantastic. And for your beautiful husband there, give him a high five for me and a fist bump. So your granddaughter currently under general anesthesia for a front tooth. Oh gosh, may HaShem give her refuah shlema and help her through that. I have a story about I know I'm not going to bore you with a story about the dentist. It is a funny story though. Some other time. Good morning, Greg. Glad you're here. Good morning, Donna. Good morning to you. Good morning, Kim Bamit. Shoshana, good morning. Samuel, good morning. I'm a little frisky this morning because Rebbetzin and I were up working here at the synagogue until like 10:30 or 11, something like that. It's been a really busy last 3 days. Today's a little bit better. Yesterday was crazy because I had deadlines I had to meet for printing and so forth. Just crazy. So I don't know. I feel invigorated. Good morning to Gianna. Glad to see you this morning. Good morning, Milka. Hope you and Zara are doing fantastic. Johan, good morning. Shoshana Keith, hope you and Yaakov are doing fantastic. Leah, good morning to you. Eliezer, Boker Tov. Seth, good morning. And Keturah, Boker Tov to you. Ariella, Rafaela, good morning to you as well. Oh, Zach and Yigal, good morning. Chris and Crystal, good morning to you. Hepzibah Boker Tov, Chanel Boker Tov. Who else do we have here? Lantern Lights, Boker Tov to you. Hope you're doing fantastic. And who else? Hannah, Boker Tov to you. Hannah Cantu, good to see you this morning. Levi, good morning to you. Hope you and your wonderful fam is doing fantastic. Let me see. Make sure I didn't forget anybody. There's the Rebbe scene. Good morning, honey. You're in. Good morning. Sergio Boker Tov. Yes, sir. Thelma, good morning. Addie, good morning. Addie, when do y'all get here? Today's Thursday. Yeah. So y'all probably come in tomorrow. So we're looking forward to you. Good morning, John. Good to see you. Good morning, Anthony. Glad to see you. And I want to make sure. Ahavat, good morning. Golly, everybody's online today. Baruch HaShem. Gress, good morning. Yoel, good morning to you. Rebbitzin, we've seen Star Trek 100 times. Yeah, I'm a super big Star Trek fan as well. Yeah. I'd like to have, I don't know, it's random thoughts. You know, my favorite show, I love I just love Star Trek. Let me stop talking about it. Good morning to Leah. Hope you and Shmuel are doing great. Varikia, good morning to you. Glad you're here. Eliezer, there he is. My 0331 pal. Good morning to you. Ura, Semper Fi. Sarah Rose Steckley. Well, good to see you, Sarah Rose. Hope you and Justin are doing great. Can't wait to see you guys again. Z-Ray, good morning to you, sir. Dr. Coleman, good morning to you, sir. Glad you're here. Heather Wilson, hope you and Zachary are doing great. Radomir, good morning, Radomir. Top of the morning. Great. Baruch HaShem. All right. And then I say Addie gets in tonight. Fly in late. Fantastic. Glad you are going to be a part of that. Baruch HaShem. Sergio, always start with the original series from the 60s, which is, by the way, the only one that's kosher. Start with that one. Good morning, Marciela. Glad you're here. All right, let's look at. By the way, it is. It's next week is the official halakhic time at which one can begin to listen to Hanukkah music officially, halakhically. I'm kidding, of course, but kind of not. I want to share with you an insight here before we get into the marriage part. It's just really interesting. Let me turn back here and find it where it is in Ma'am Loez, because it has to do with the marriage, of course, of Rebecca and Isaac. Come on. Where'd it go? There's lots of pages here I was going through. Here it is. So it's an insight about the age of Rebecca, and more importantly, at the time at which she was born. And so for those of you who may have read this story and you've looked at some of the insights regarding it, perhaps in the Chumash maybe, or maybe some other source, some of you might find something that seems a little like eyebrow raising. And that is that there's a tradition that's brought down from the Midrashim that Rebecca was 3 years old when Isaac married her. And now that type of language has unfortunately given rise to a lot of, ridiculous anti-Semitism that talks about that, Jewish people are, pedophiles and so forth, which is, of course, ridiculous. A young woman cannot even marry until she's at a marriageable age, okay, which back in the old days, back in antiquity, and really frankly not that long ago in our own world, if you will, that marriageable age was a whole lot younger than it is today. So in today's day and age, about the earliest that a woman could get married with her family's permission, and this is true in Texas, and I think it's true in a lot of other states, is 16. And I've known at least one young lady who did, in fact, with her parents' permission, get married at 16. And I've known some other women, I won't name names, that were married at 16. Okay. Now, for a lot of people and our day and age, that sounds crazy young. And maybe it is, because I think, in my personal opinion, it's not scientific, but personally, I think that probably young ladies were more mature at 16 back a few years ago than they are today. Nevertheless, there are plenty of people in the world, women, who have gotten married at a very young age, maybe 16, who had perfectly fine and normal marriages and children and so forth and so on. Okay. And I think that sometimes in our modern culture, if I could just make a side statement, we get very hyperbolic, and we need to be careful about labeling people that we call college age students children. And that drives me, frankly, personally bananas. I celebrated my 19th birthday in the jungles of Panama, carrying an M60 Echo 3 machine gun that fired really large bullets, many hundreds of them a minute. Okay. So it blows my mind when you have people that are in their 20s in college, and we're calling them kids. Now I get it. I'm 50 years old. Okay. So I get it that when I consider somebody who's in their 20s, I think of them as a kid, in the sense that, I'm probably not going to sit at your feet and let you teach me wisdom, because you don't have any, most likely. However, you're not a kid. Okay. And so we have to be careful about that, I think, in our modern age, that we stop referring to our children that are in college as children. They're not. So anyway, 16. But in antiquity, sometimes people got married much younger. So going back to this idea that she was 3 years old, I don't know of anybody who really takes that literally. I think there's some metaphorical things being said there. And it has to do with what I'm about to read metaphorically. But in reality, the sensible commentaries say that she was actually 14, which is really probably about right. So 14, 15 was, generally speaking, when young ladies would get married back in the day. Now, Isaac was 40. Okay. So there's a significant age difference there. However, that's not necessarily uncommon either, because keep in mind that life expectancy, back in the olden days may not have been as long, and so forth and so on. But that's neither here nor there. But the age difference is not so uncommon from antiquity. But more importantly, not to focus on that. That really wasn't my point. The point is that it's interesting that Isaac is 40 and what the number 40 represents. But let me read this insight, and I'll kind of circle back to the 3-year-old thing and kind of talk about the metaphorical aspect of it. Okay. That's right. Zach and Yigal said, Isaac was a lad, quote unquote, at 37. Clearly he wasn't a child, but, in his father's eyes, who's 137, he looks pretty young. So anyway, it says here, just because Rebecca, this is the inside. Okay. So just because Rebecca is 37 years old, 37 years younger than Isaac, she wasn't really. She wasn't that's not a true number, but you got to pay attention to the inside here. It does not make us any less willing, does not make us any less willing to let her marry him. Here, Rebecca is waiting. Take her and go. Let her become a good wife to the son of your master, as you have spoken. So this is the sentence I wanted to focus on in this insight, okay? The very fact that she was born at the exact moment that he was spared from the Akedah is a true sign that she is his true bride. Okay, so let's go back to the 3-year-old thing. And this is really what I wanted to focus on. Okay? Don't get lost in the numbers and all this. Was Rebecca 3 years old when Isaac married her? Well, of course not. Okay, that's ridiculous. A 3-year-old can barely talk, much less provide water for a grown man and all of his camels and all of his men. Okay, clearly. Okay. But at the same time, she was in fact 3 years old, but not literally, not with respect to chronology. She was actually 14. Okay. However, notice what it says. The very fact that she was born at the exact moment that he was spared from the Akedah is a sure sign that she is his true bride. In other words, when Isaac was offered on the altar, there was something supernatural that happened in Rebekah's life and Rebekah's heart. And that is, she was born again. And from the time that he was offered on the altar until the time that she married him, there was a 3-year time span. Meaning that she was 3 years old, not from the date of her natural birth, but from the date of her spiritual birth. Something happened. So what does this teach us? It means that if we're going to be a bride of Messiah, then we have to truly be born again. And being born again is deeply spiritual. And notice that Rebekah was born the moment that Isaac was offered on the altar. You have to be born again. Now, I think that people that here's my belief is that people that find Lapid Judaism are people, and I don't want to say, I'm trying to be careful because I don't want to exclude anybody, and I don't want to sound like you're if you don't follow this path, then you're not truly right with God or whatever, because I don't want to make that kind of judgment. But I just want to say that I think the people that really grasp hold of Lapid Judaism and really hold on to it, like they really grasp it, are people that prior to, even in the midst of their ignorance, which ignorance is not a bad word, it just means you don't know what you don't know, they truly did love the Messiah and they truly did love God. I've talked to people before who through the process of, and I think sometimes it's a shock process, but they come out of Christianity and they kind of have this journey, whether sometimes it's directly from Christianity to this, or sometimes it's Christianity to Hebrew roots to Messianic, or some combination thereof to this. They come into Lapid Judaism and their world gets rocked. And they start to realize that a lot of things they believed in the past are not true, and it gets them to start questioning this and questioning that, and all that's normal. There are answers, of course. Ask me. That's okay. Don't ask me, like somebody who knows something. But anyway, and people, I've had these conversations with people who begin to even doubt the Messiah, which fortunately is not very common, but it does happen. And they kind of, sometimes when I talk to them, they kind of come across as, well, this is natural, right? I mean, if you really get into Judaism, you're eventually gonna cross this bridge. And I'm like, no, not necessarily. To me, Judaism supports the Messiah. Absolutely. When I did get into the sources, Midrash, Zohar, Talmud, Or HaHayim, Mam Loez, Gutna Kumat, Kael Tumash. To me, all it's done is support my position that Yeshua is the Messiah. You better believe it. And I'm not talking about taking stuff out of context or whatever, like people always accuse, that kind of stuff. No. But there's a deeper thing too. Why am I here? How did I get here? How did I get to this place where I'm sitting in front of you right now talking about Torah-true Judaism in the Messiah? How did I get to the place where I acquired all of these sources and read them? I have a library that I have read. My library is not stagnant. It's not static. If you pull a book off of my shelf, it's going to be tagged. There's going to be multiple tags in it, okay? That's an important caveat. Can I just say it's an important caveat? Because, you can have books, but you may not have read them. But anyway, my point I'm trying to make is, how did I get here? What led me here? What caused me to have my eyes opened to these truths that I share with you on a daily basis, and I have done so for 6 years just here. That doesn't count everything else that I've done for years before. And the answer, ladies and gentlemen, is one word: Yeshua. That's why I'm here. It is Yeshua who led me here. If it wasn't for Yeshua and me reading the Gospels and studying them, it would have never led me here. It was Yeshua and the knowledge of the Messiah that led me to Judaism. So, I mean, to me, it makes perfect sense. So you say, well, have you ever doubted the Messiah? Well, I mean, have I ever confronted that question? Sure. But for me, when I read the sources, and I actually read them and actually know them, I don't know what I know, ladies and gentlemen, because do you know that I never watch videos of other rabbis? Not never. I shouldn't say never, but it's like Sasquatch. I as often as people see Sasquatch, I've watched other videos. I've taken yeshiva classes and I've gone to synagogues, but in other words, I don't know what I know because I watched the videos on the internet. All that to say that what I'm talking about here only serves to support the Messiah. So we're talking here about Rebekah being born anew, born again. And that's why she married Isaac. And if you think about Isaac being 40 years old, that's the time of the time in the wilderness, the time of turning, the time of growing, the time of learning. But it was really, the reason you say, well, where's all this coming from? Why are you talking like this morning? Well, because it was Isaac's sacrifice that caused his wife to be born. It was Isaac's time on the altar that caused his bride to be born. In other words, the reason that Rebekah was able to come out of the idolatry of Haran was precisely because of the one who was bound. It wasn't her. His sacrifice awakened her. You understand what the connection I'm trying to make to you? So she's not going to leave the land of Haran and go and then divorce Isaac, because Isaac is the reason she's awakened anyway. Hence Yeshua. I won't do as the bride of Yeshua, spiritually speaking, of course. I'm not going to divorce Yeshua. He's the reason I'm awake. So take that for what it's worth. There are some people who will be like, okay, I'm with you on that, Rabbi. And there are some people who won't. And that's why we're the few and the proud. So let's go to the insights now. And if you know what I'm talking about if you feel the same way I do, say amen. And if you don't, then say oh my. So it says here, marriage, sweet marriage. I so wanted to do that when Sarah and Shane were going to get married. But, it's not appropriate. But it would have been funny. I teased her. I teased Sarah that when she came up on the platform, I was going to go, marriage, sweet marriage. I would never have done that, of course. But it would have been funny. I never would have done it. But anyway, marriage. So it says in Mam Luez, just a few notes on marriage here, okay? This entire section teaches how careful a person must be when choosing a spouse. One who marries into a family of questionable background is like one who plows the entire world and then sows salt. Elijah wrote, and God himself sealed the writ. Woe is to the man who defiles his offspring and blemishes his family. So here it's teaching that when you're going to marry somebody, the marriage it's going to go on and tell us, of course, it's not supposed to be about finances. It's not supposed to be about looks. Is she pretty? Is he handsome? It's not supposed to be about romance, romance, as we say in French. But it's really supposed to be about character and ultimately about spirituality. This is why we've talked about, there's nothing worse than being in a marriage where the two people are on different spiritual levels or universes. And some people choose to live like that for various reasons for decades. And sometimes that's because they've been taught that once you get married, you can never not be married. And the Bible doesn't teach that. Okay. But I don't know. We talked about this in times past, but being on the same spiritual page is really what matters most about a marriage. And when that is not the case, I think that most people would agree with me. It is miserable. Okay. I don't care if there's money involved. I don't care if he or she are stunningly beautiful. I don't care if all else is right in the world. When you're not on the same spiritual page, it is absolute misery. And so that's what matters most in a marriage. So it says, if a person stubbornly insists on marrying into a family that is tainted, his family has a right to prevent him. His actions will blemish the entire family line. When a person marries into a family of questionable background, God himself punishes him and testifies that his offspring are blemished. His association with the Jewish people is diminished, since the divine presence only rests upon families with an unambiguous background and without any blemish. So when it talks about background, what's it talking about? Well, it's not necessarily talking about a portfolio. It's not talking about, when it says questionable background, it's not talking about a carnal situation or things that have to do with this world, but it's talking about the person's character, the person's religious position. As an example, let me give you this comment here. Okay. In order to determine the background of a family, the Talmud gives several signs. If a person accepts insults without replying, it can be assumed that he comes from a good family. Such families do not involve themselves in arguments and refrain from embarrassing others. So you see, when it talks about background, it's talking about musar issues. It's talking about religious issues. I just want to make that clear. Okay. It's not talking about, marrying somebody from the proverbial wrong side of the tracks. It's not talking about that. It says, however, if a person is always involved in arguments and disputes, one should avoid him. The same is true if the person calls other people, and it uses a different word here, but illegitimate children, you can fill in the blank, or other derogatory terms. This is a sign that his background is also questionable. The faults that one finds in others are usually his own. This is why we have to be careful that we're constantly talking bad about people. The sages point out that the faults that we find in other people are really a reflection of the faults that we have in our own selves. And it's a hard pill to swallow, and it's a good way to make sure we keep our mouths shut. Okay. It goes on to say here in this insight, one should try to avoid marrying into a family which is totally ignorant of Judaism. Okay. So for those who are not yet married, if you're not married and you're a Jew, you should never marry a non-Jew. Or at the very least, okay, this little caveat here. Someone who's not willing to convert with the right intentions. And the reason I say that is because, look, in Judaism, you would never marry somebody who's not a Jew, of course. And in Judaism, somebody cannot go through conversion just because they want to marry someone. Okay. Now, in our movement, we have to be a little bit lenient in that latter area as a practical matter. Why? Because there's not a bunch of Lapidniks around. And so if you have a lady or a man and they want to get married and they meet somebody who is, somebody who loves God and so forth and so on, and that person, because maybe motivated by the relationship, wants to go through conversion, but with sincerity, they really do want to go through conversion. And part of their motivation is because, hey, I met this lady, I met this guy, or whatever, I met this, whatever. We have to be a little bit understanding of that, because otherwise you put people in a position where they can't ever get married because there's nobody to marry. Okay. So there's that, right? Just want to throw that as a practical thing. So it says here, before a man marries a woman, he should get to know her brothers. Children often take after their mother's brothers. So that's also, if she has siblings, it's good to know, get to meet her family, get to meet her parents, because the apple does not always fall too far from the tree, so to speak, right? These are practical advices. So another insight here from Ma'am Loez. It is customary to read this section when a bridegroom is called up to the Torah. What section? This section of Chayei Sarah, the section of Rebecca, Rebecca being found as a wife for Isaac. Okay. So it says, it is customary to read this section when a bridegroom is called up to the Torah. It teaches that one should be careful when marrying and not be misled by mere physical attraction. One could argue that the Rebbetzin married me because I was stunningly handsome. But that's not really why she married me. I'm just kidding. She was stunningly beautiful, actually, but that's not why I married her. I married her because she could cook beef stew, which is really not the answer, actually, either. No, she's a very godly woman, and she has saved my soul from hell, indeed. It teaches that one should be careful when marrying and not be misled by mere physical attraction. It is thus written, false is grace, vain is beauty. It is a God-fearing woman who deserves praise, from Proverbs 31:30. Now, of course, when we read that, we're not saying that our wives are not beautiful. Of course they are. Okay? But it's saying that simply that's not her great asset. What makes her wonderful is that she's a God-fearing woman. One should ignore money and not marry into prominent families merely to gain status, or as they say in Great Britain, status. Do they say status in Great Britain? I just made that up. But in any case, so money is not part of it. The main thing is to seek a God-fearing mate. Then one will be assured of having good children. I would go on to say and add to that, not just having good children, but you'll be assured of having a good relationship. You'll be assured of having peace and shalom. There are plenty of people who are married and they have good finances and they've got kids and life is generally well, but they're not on the same spiritual page. And in actual fact, they're miserable. And what keeps them married? A lot of times it's a financial arrangement, which, people need to do what they need to do, I suppose. And they've got to do what they believe is right and so forth and so on. But, you know, you've also got to think about what's most important. I don't know. That's only a decision that people can make on their own. But I will tell you that if you are a couple that is on the same spiritual page, and maybe you're having difficulty sometimes rubbing two nickels together, you'll be much happier than a couple that is completely on different pages and full of wealth. And how many of you know that's true? So, by the way, I said yesterday, I talked about Eliezer walking on or hovering rather above the well, and Laban therefore not being able to work his incantations against him because of that. Talked about Yeshua walking on the water. I mentioned yesterday that I couldn't recall where that source was at the moment. But I found it this morning, and it's actually in Mam Loez's commentary to chapter 24 and verse 30. So I just want to point that out. Whenever I give you a source, whenever I tell you that something is somewhere, I'm never making that up. I may not exactly remember exactly where I read it. It may take me a minute to find it, but I am never making it up. Okay. Just want to point that out. All right. So really quickly moving to our next part of this, Isaac, Rebecca comes comes home with Eliezer, and she sees Isaac coming from the field. And it says in chapter 24 and verse 63, Isaac went out to meditate in the field toward evening. He raised his eyes and suddenly saw camels coming. So it goes on to tell us why he went out to the field. And he went out to the field to pray. It says here he was in a special field, actually. The one that he was in was the field of Machpelah. So he had gone to pray, actually, at Machpelah. And that's the place from which he was coming. So it gives us a few insights here regarding the Minka service. So the Minka service, the afternoon service, is attributed to Isaac because it says it was in the evening, or early afternoon, or late afternoon rather. He was coming in, coming in from praying. So it says, the Talmud says that a person must be very careful with regard to the afternoon service of Minka. When Elijah challenged the idolatrous priest, he chose the time of Minka to worship, and only then was he answered. 1 Kings 19:36. Now, I want to point something else out because I mentioned earlier about how Jewish literature only confirms the Gospels, and that's a fact. Okay. Now, we also know that Yeshua was crucified at the time of Minka. And so, by the way, was Isaac. Or actually, Isaac was, scratch that. Isaac was actually offered in the morning time, which is why he's the morning lamb. That's right. And Yeshua was offered at Minka, which is the afternoon lamb. That's true. Okay. The most powerful time of worship, of prayer, the most powerful time is actually not Shacharit, it's Minka. All the big miracles happen at Minka time. And that's when Yeshua was offered, okay? And it's also, as it said here, the time when Elijah offered up the sacrifice and confronted the idolatrous priests. But there's something else that I find interesting, because in referencing the book of Acts, there's a story there where Kepha and Yochanan are going to the temple at the time of Minka, and that's where the man who was calling for alms at Gate Beautiful, that's where they allegedly famously said to him, silver and gold we don't have, but what we do have, we give to you. Okay? And then, of course, he was healed. But I want to point out that story, interestingly, mentions that occurred when they were on their way to the temple to daven Minka, which would also mean that they were participating in the temple services, which would mean that they were participating in the temple sacrifices a while after the resurrection of Yeshua. Okay. Which all of that has interesting implications. So it says here, continuing on, it says, of course, one must concentrate during all the services. The Minka service, however, must be recited with particular intensity and feeling. This is especially true since the afternoon is a time of judgment. When the temple was destroyed, the sanctuary burned during the time of Minka, according to the Zohar. When a person returns home from business, it is very easy to say, I just came home and I would like to rest a bit. I have a few things to attend to. Then if I have time, I will recite Minka. If I cannot say it, I'll make up Minka after the evening service. It is very wrong to do this, and it can subject one to severe divine punishment in the next world. One is required to set aside all his affairs and recite Minka in its correct time. Generally speaking, Minka is one of the most difficult prayer times to hold to because it generally occurs in the middle of our daily activities. And it's something that we as human beings need to work on. We just need to have a hard stop. And now, Minka does not have to be an hour long. And in fact, generally speaking, Minka is usually about 15 to 20 minutes, roughly. Could be a little bit more, could be potentially less. But that's not really the point. And by the way, you don't get extra credit for time. You know, well, I daven Minka or I daven Shacharit for 45 minutes. Somebody says, I did it for 2 hours. There's no extra credit for, you don't get a special medal for, combat operations in a prayer zone. So I'm just saying, right? But more importantly, we have to keep this time of prayer and do our best because we see the importance of it, right? And it goes on to say, one should not depend on saying a make-up prayer after the evening service. If one does so, the entire prayer is really in vain. The make-up prayer was only ordained for when one inadvertently misses a service or is for some reason forced to miss it. At this point, it would be well to review some of the laws that apply to the Minka service. And it goes on to talk about when we're supposed to say Minka and the different parts of the Minka service and so forth, which really the Minka service consists of Psalm 145, the Amidah, and Takuna, usually, unless it's a holiday or Kol HaMoed or something to that effect, which really is Psalm 145, Amidah, and in a time of Teshuvah. The reason that Teshuvah is added at Minka is because it's a time of judgment. Now, in Sephardic communities and our community as well, we add the Korbanot service. So really, for Lapid Judaism, we daven the Shacharit. We daven the Sephardic Minka service, which includes prior to Psalm 145, includes the Korbanot service, the Korbanot service. So it goes on to talk about that. But more importantly, we learn here that Minka comes from Isaac, which is interesting because, as we'll conclude with this thought, that there's a connection here. I said Isaac was offered in the morning, so he represents that morning lamb. And Yeshua was offered in the afternoon, which he represents the final evening lamb. But it's interesting that Isaac introduced Minka, which is the time at which, it really precisely is the time at which Yeshua was offered. So Isaac introduces Minka, which is an allusion to the fact that the binding of Isaac is going to introduce the binding of the one true Messiah. End of our Aliyah today. I hope this has been helpful to you. And I hope that you've enjoyed it. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow as we close out the week and wrap up our blessing, our insights rather. Thank you for being here. Please be sure and like this program and subscribe to our channel. If you're on Facebook, share this with all of your friends. Hopefully it's helpful and meaningful to people. God bless you. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Until then, have a great and amazing day.